Welcome back. It's time for another Big Wheels series, and on the Honda Elite 250 this time. I was out riding I guess it was last Saturday. This is what, the third week of April, and I was noticing after I rode for a while, I was like, wait a minute, it's starting to shudder a little bit when I was taking off, and it just was acting up. And then when I'd stopped at a place, a motorcycle shop actually, I put my hand down on where the clutch is, and the whole housing around the outside was hot. So I was assuming before I knew that the clutch is gone. And that was something that I didn't check when I had the side cover off, because I already knew that I wanted to get the engine running and to see if it would run reliably for a while before I did any other maintenance to it. Put the tires on. It was running fine at the time and everything looked okay at the time, but it was just time for a change, 7,000 miles. And before it came from up in Alaska, it was probably a lot of stop and go, because Juneau doesn't have a lot of roads to anywhere. So all the roads would have been stop and go. So let me show you change up here to what I've got. And I was checking the manual, and I got to get a new belt, a new bell, new clutch, shoes, and then all the O-rings and the oil seals. And then let me turn around here. And on they call it the drive pulley, but I like to call it the variator. I didn't realize until I took this back plate off, this thing was full of grease, because I don't know if, I know the T-Max is dry, and I'm assuming all the newer scooters are dry, but this old guy's full of grease, so I've got to get new oil seals for both sides. This thing mics out correct for the diameter on, I think, called a Boss, and they need to be packed with grease, and then the inside measures okay too. They're probably both getting down to the limits where, to do it one more time, these would both get changed out. These guys are fine. There's no wear I can determine on any of the little plastic parts here. But the rollers, I was going to reuse them again because there's no flat spots on them and there's no scratching. Once I cleaned all the grease off them, they look pretty good. But this is the only one that the plastic doesn't swivel over the metal. So I think I'm going to order some, in for a pound, in for a penny. I'm going to order some rollers too. I wish I knew if somebody, if this one will get posted before I get the parts. I don't know if the Dr. Sliders, I don't think they run in grease. I think they run dry. So be interesting to know if anybody's changed out one of these CN 250 clutches to something new and put Dr. Sliders in them, whether or not they greased them up. I'll have to go see Dr. Sliders. And like I said, the bell comes in at 135 is the minimum, and it's actually 136, so it's over. So this thing's worn out. And then on the shoes, clutch shoes down here, these are the old brown ones too. I guess the new ones are green, and these are down below the 2 millimeter minimum thickness also. And then I've got my little homemade compression tool here, just some plastic and wood, and it works on this is the one I made for the T-Max, but it works fine for the Honda too. I did have a hard time getting this nut to break loose. That was a real bitch. But I had my little butane torch, and I heated up one or two sides of it to make it expand, and then with a little bit of WD-40 squirts in there then too, then it eventually popped. So now I'm going ahead and take the throttle, or let's see, I guess I can go ahead and okay, It's loose. Now I can go ahead and take this. We'll come back. I can give you a little bit of a twirl here. I need to measure the spring. That's about the last thing I need to find out for the order I'm going to make, to see how it is. I'll probably get a new spring too. I mean, this thing has been there forever. We'll come back when I get all this tore apart. Well, I've got all this. There's that. This stuff's taken apart, so I'll get the nut off. And pull this guy off. Yeah, you can see how glazed up these guys are. There's hardly any thickness to them. So let me get my manual out, and so it's all yucky in here too. Clean this up and give this a measure. Now it says in the manual the service limit is 94 millimeters, and I'm getting 98. So I guess this spring still has some spring left in it, so I'll have to think about that. Getting the seal collar off was a little, I had to spray some WD-40 around it to soak in, and then use a couple screwdrivers to kind of pry it up. Now it'll come off. There we go. Basically, that's what holds the spring. Now I can pull out the pins and get the two parts apart and clean them up. Now that the seal collar is off here, we can get access to the little, you got to pull this up a little bit in order to get access to the pins, and then pull them out, set them aside. The bigger end here goes into the slots, and then there's the stubby little bottom there goes in. Oh, interesting. If I can show these or not. These are little rollers. They come apart, so be careful when you're cleaning these things. You don't lose them. Good to know. Okay. Now we can take that apart. Clean everything up in here. Check the bearings. Well, I've got the fixed plate cleaned out, got all the old grease out there, but on further looking at this thing, in order to get to the seal in here, everything has to get driven out that way. It has to go pound out, and once you pound everything out, then you'll need new bearings also. So it seems to be growing fine, and the seals are doing. I think I'm going to go on the side of caution, since this is so old, and who knows what's going to break next, that I can't see myself spending that kind of money. You can get this whole unit. Everything is already assembled, the bearings, the seals, everything, and I think it was like $74, and it comes with a packet of grease you put inside. So I think I'm going to chicken out and do that. In fact, I was measuring the pads here again, and you can't tell, but it's thicker on the inside than it is on the outside. So I don't know how these things, they must, when they sling out, they tip to the outside goes out harder. So I think I'll still get new clutch pads and new rollers and some various O-rings and probably the seals for this. And spring I cleaned up, and it still measures right. I don't know how long a new spring is. I mean, if I knew that, then that would be handy, because it still measures in being adequate. So how much do you spend on these things? I mean, it's not a Concours d'Elegance with all the broken panels and stuff, and it rides. It's a rider. It's not a show scoot. So I think and it didn't. If I have to, this thing craps out on me. It didn't take me probably an hour to get everything off and down. I do need a new belt though, so I'm going to get a belt and some other things. I want to redo my my order this afternoon to see what I need. So we'll come back later. One of the other things I was doing too while I had the side cover off, I pulled this cap. Where are we at here? This cap off the engine hole right here, right in there, to adjust the valves. It's a real pain. You have to put a nut on the variator, the drive pulley, and turn it around counterclockwise in the direction it's spinning until it took me, I don't know how many times I went around, a dozen times I went around until I finally found I had to stick a stick. I had to put a piece of wood down the spark plug hole here and then I had to put in the spark plug once too, just to know I was building compression, and then pulled the spark plug out and stuck the stick in until I could roll it around and see right on you could just barely see it on the end of the shaft, the camshaft, below the circlip there. You'll get confused with the circlip. It's right on the very edge. There's a little notch indentation in the end of the cam that you need to line up with this groove right there. And then once that happens, then I don't know if you can see it here or not. You got these two levers, one on the exhaust and one on the intake, that you undo the bolts, let the lever, this thing right here. Let me sit up lower. I'm going to have to hand hold it here, so pardon the shakes. You got these two little levers there, and those, well, they're little cams, and they're attached to the shafts of the rockers, and that's what sets your clearance on the valves. And then once you have, like I said, the hole down in there lined up with that slot on the bottom, then you're top dead center, and then you loosen up each of these nuts and let these cams go away from each other until they stop. And then look to where you're at. They got these little slices, graduations here. You have to clean up with a brush in order to see them. And then once you can see what it stopped at, then you move it back in that direction one notch. And each notch on that cam here is 4 thousandths. And that's what the clearance should be. So just undo these, let them come out, push them back one notch, and then tighten them down. That can be problematic, getting these things tightened down without, because when you tighten the screw down, it wants to push this thing back again. So you kind of almost have to have like a little spin tight, and then just tighten the nut down gradually, and then make sure that, keep an eye on which one of these graduations you're at. So what a pain. Now I'm going to put some anti-seize on that plug and stick it back in again. Then I can put the plug back in, spark plug. I've even got a new spark plug for it then.